welcome to Dante's Dialogues. My name is Dante, and I'm your host. Hope you guys enjoyed episode one. I realized I was a little stiff. I was going back and listening to it and got some feedback, and I realized that I was being very scripty. I was like reading from a script, even though majority of it was me freeballing. I think I was too nervous to mess up, so I was like really trying to like almost sound robotic to make sure I didn't mess up. So I'm gonna live with the mistakes I make now. I'm gonna edit some goofy stuff out probably, but I'm gonna try to be more genuine when I'm talking about. These are my hobbies. They shouldn't sound like a script. I'm not a robot. I'm a regular fan like everybody else who's gonna listen to this. So let's get with it. So today's episode is going to be entirely focused on the NFL free agency. This is going to be some top trades, moves. We did not really go into defense on my notes, but we will kind of go over the list by Pro Football Focus and kind of see some of the big defensive prospects that got signed, and we'll talk about them and see what was big and what I think their impact's going to be. The majority of this will be all offense, primarily quarterback, receiver, running back. So let's get started. Probably one of the biggest moves of the offseason and one that we were waiting for as soon as Chicago was going to end up with the first overall pick. Thanks, Carolina, for that. Um, Justin Fields was traded to the Steelers for, I believe, a sixth round pick. It had potential to be higher, but it was focused on Justin Fields playing football this year. And as of right now, the goal is that he's going to be a backup to Russell Wilson, which say as much as you want about Russell Wilson. The dude is a proven winner, and Justin Fields getting to learn behind somebody like that and Mike Tomlin and, some proven winners, even if they haven't had a recent success. That's good. It's good for a young player who's been in a really awful situation in Chicago. So good for Justin Fields. I think this is a trade where it's like, Steelers, if he sucks, he sucks. A 6th round pick, you're gonna live with it. I think it's the best trade for the player. The player wins more than anything. Gets out of Chicago, even though they went and get some weapons, But I think it's great for him. He'll go out there, he'll learn, and then possibly next year he'll, kind of get into it and maybe show us that he's the real deal. Another trade that goes back to the Steelers is Kenny Pickett was traded from the Steelers to Philly. From what I understand, the story there was that Kenny Pickett was kind of told he'd have the opportunity to, compete. And then once they signed Russell Wilson, that all went out the window. He was basically told he wouldn't be competing anymore. So he said, all right, I'm out. Which is funny because he's going to Philadelphia where he also will not be able to compete for the starting job. But he's a Philly fan. He grew up a Philly fan. There's evidence all over that he was a Philly fan. So I think he'd at least be happy to sit back there in Philadelphia and, learn behind Hurts and see how that goes for him. So good luck to Kenny in Philadelphia. All right. So that was the big trades that I could think of. We might have some more. I made these notes for the episode I did with Mind of Huddy. So if you want kind of to get the original thoughts on all that, kind of bouncing off of somebody else, go check out his episode. It should be the episode that's basically in reference to Akira Toriyama. A pretty big function of that is us talking about free agency. So the first big signing in free agency for quarterbacks, very biggest one for sure, would be Kirk Cousins, who got a monster 4-year, $180 million deal to sign with the Falcons. I'm not going to say it's good or bad, okay? I'm saying that it's an upgrade for the Falcons. 100% an upgrade. You go from Ritter, who's just trash. He was awful. Couldn't get the ball downfield. He really brought you nothing positive. So it's a net positive just moving on from him. So Kirk Cousins comes. He can play. Okay, he's coming off a torn Achilles, but he's not the type of player that needs his mobility. He's not really great at escaping sacks. He's not going to be running downfield. So you shouldn't notice really a difference with him in that aspect. But he was hurt last year. His stats were still good. If he'd have played the whole season, he would have had a fantastic year. He played 8 games. He still had about 2,300 yards, 18 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions, and was passing just under 70%. That's an elite season. All right. And he had Justin Jefferson, who got hurt. Can't remember if Justin Jefferson got hurt after or before, but I feel like it was before. We got plenty of He got plenty of weapons now over there. He's going to have Kyle Pitts, who has been so underutilized. It's actually insane. He gets Drake London, who's only getting better. BJ Robinson, who has the potential to be a superstar running back if he's actually utilized. And they actually traded Desmond Ritter to get Randall Moore, who also adds a lot of versatility to their receiver room. So I think they're going to get better offensively. I think if they can make sure their defense is good, kind of go off of how they were doing about 2 years ago, they can build on that type of defense and they get a Kirk Cousins offense. I think they should at least be competing for the NFC South division title this year. So then the other one that everyone's going to or at least like to talk about, is the Russell Wilson on a 1 year, $1.2 million deal. You heard that right. $1.2 million. The reason is because Denver, because of the contract, they released him, but they're on the books for him this year for $38 million. And I believe they're still paying him the year after that too. The Wilson's like, I don't care. I'm already getting paid this year, so let's make something happen. He had a pretty solid year. I mean, he wasn't great. He had about 3,000 yards, 25 touchdowns, under 10 interceptions. A solid season, a Russell Wilson type season. Not necessarily the yards, but it's Denver, and they were a shit show last year. And he was on a team where which came out later, was that he was, being targeted. They didn't want him on the team. They were trying to find ways for him to void his own contract. So, I mean, I'd say that's pretty good, depending on what, how you look at it. He's going to get some solid options. Got George Pickens, who should be, a bona fide star now that he should have somebody that at least knows how to throw the ball, accurately. They are missing some weapons, really, the receiver position. So we'll kind of see, they have Najee Harris in the back, who maybe will, be able to keep building on the year he just had. So hopefully they draft at least one, top tier, first 2 or 3 rounds receiver to really help them there. I'm not really sure if they're going to make any free agent moves. They're going to move the needle or not. Deontay Johnson was traded to the Carolina Panthers, so they did lose him, which was their number one. You could tell he did not want to be there anymore. I'm not sure he's going to be much happier in Carolina, but hopefully Bryce Young will be able to he'll be able to bounce back after such an awful rookie year that was way beyond him. But it's not looking hot. It's not looking good for him. I'll tell you that. That is the like really big deal recent quarterbacks. For the most part, it's not needle movers. We got Gardner Minshew into Las Vegas on a 2 year deal. He was a starter over there in Indiana. He's good. He's not great. He's good. He'll win you some games, but I don't think Las Vegas is hoping that he's a permanent staple for them for sure. I think you do see them draft one of the like top 5 quarterbacks if they're available. So we'll see what Las Vegas does, but they better do something. Devontae Adams is my favorite receiver. And if they give him some scrub to throw to him all year again, I'm going to be pissed. They need to give him, I know like a young guy is not going to really be going out there and giving him a 2,000-yard season, but he needs to be utilized better because that first half of the year in Las Vegas was atrocious to watch how underutilized, arguably the best receiver in the league is. Next off, we have Jacoby Brissett. He signed in New England a 1 year deal. Again, I don't need a mover at all. He's fine. He's an okay quarterback. He's a very solid backup. He's not a starter. New England has a high pick. Do suggest that they will draft a top 3 probably quarterback. They could be in the Drake, in the May or the Daniels. They could be somewhere in there. Maybe they go a little late. Maybe they use another pick and try to get like Bo Nix. But I'd like to see them getting established like top talent quarterback to start building that new era in New England. Next off, I have Sam Howell was traded from the Commanders to the Seahawks to compete for Geno Smith. I don't think he's going to win that. I think Geno Smith's got it in the bag, but Sam Howell can go learn and possibly become better. He's got, a better system over there in Seattle, but we'll see with the new head coach. But than he did over there in the Commanders, which is also a shit show. Sam Darnold has signed with the Minnesota Vikings on a 1 year deal. He's fine. He had some good games over there in Carolina when he was over there, and DJ Moore and him had a good connection for a little while over there. So maybe him and Justin Jefferson can develop something. But I also think the Minnesota Vikings might move up in the draft. They have 2 first-round picks right now. They could use that collateral to move up and get them maybe a franchise quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo signed with the Rams to back up Matthew Stafford. That's fine. I think he's a fine backup. He shouldn't be a starter for your team. The system over there in San Francisco is really quarterback friendly. So we don't really know what Jimmy Garoppolo is at this point, but we did see how awful he was in Las Vegas. So I think him being a backup's fine. If he needs to come in for a game or two and try to help you win, he can do that, but you can't expect him to be a regular. And then Jameis Winston signed with the Cleveland Browns on a 1 year, $4 million deal. That's fine. I'm really sad that he never got to truly get a chance in New Orleans. He never really got a chance to start despite all the quarterback issues they've had since Drew Brees has left and retired. But I hope that Deshaun Watson sucks. They give him a real chance. I'm thinking that Deshaun Watson will finally bounce back. He gets a whole off season with a team. No suspensions or not playing football for over a year. None of that's going to be on him. So we'll see. Cleveland Browns have definitely stocked up on their weapons too this year, which we'll go over. But that's my quarterbacks. If I miss somebody that you think is important, my bad. These are the ones that I thought were a big deal, or at least were like worth mentioning. There's a bunch of backups that got signed. There's really no big, signings per se. We didn't really have a deep quarterback, stock. And I also didn't mention like players that re-signed, like, Baker Mayfield staying over there and with the Bucks and stuff like that. I didn't mention that. If it's a re-signing, it's not a big deal. Like, they're staying where they were at. So if I don't mention your favorite re-signings, sorry. Not sorry. Free agency moves at receiver. Deontay Johnson, I've already mentioned, was traded to the Carolina Panthers. Curtis Samuel signed with the Buffalo Bills on a 3 year, $24 million deal. I think Curtis Samuel is one of those really good players that have become underrated, and playing on a really bad Commanders team did not help that. He ended up with about 600 yards and 4 touchdowns, but Scary Terry didn't have a great year either. He just scraped 1,000 yards, only had 4 touchdowns. It just wasn't a very good offense. I think going over there to the Bills, that really gives them, kind of a replacement for Gabe Davis. Probably won't give you the same big play um, type of catches that Gabe Davis gave you, but I think that's a solid addition for them to replace him for sure. The biggest one of the year for sure for me is Keenan Allen being traded to the Bears for a 4th round pick. Last year, he had an outstanding year, over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. He's getting to play with DJ Moore on the other side rather than, on the Chargers where, basically once Mike Williams went down, it was him versus the world. He's going to get that. He's going to be playing with Caleb Williams. Unless Caleb Williams pulls a Eli Manning, he'll be playing with Caleb Williams, which good for Caleb Williams. He's going to come in. He's going to get DJ Moore, a bona fide number 1 receiver. He's going to get Keenan Allen, a bona fide, really top 10 receiver, and one of the best route runners in football, and one of the best 3rd down receivers in football. If they can build that line, that's going to be a scary offense. And I do think that's one of the best, probably, duos in the league in terms of receiver. There's definitely some great ones, but I definitely think they're among the best if they can get a line out there to protect and give Caleb Williams time. I do mention that T. Higgins was franchise tagged by the Bengals. They have to sign him. They have to sign him. They Unless they have a good draft plan. You can't just go out there with Jamar Chase. You're already losing Tyler Boyd. You can't lose T. Higgins too. You had pretty much the best trio in football, and now, you're looking at Jamar Chase, who is a bona fide superstar, but you gotta have somebody else. T. Higgins has proven he's a fantastic number 2. He can get you 1,000 yards. He can make that big time catch to win a game. So hopefully they sign him. But if somebody trades for him, they're getting a baller, bro. They're getting a dude. So hopefully him and the Bengals can work something out and not have to involve a trade. We have Gabe Davis, who we mentioned earlier. He signed in Jacksonville on a 3 year, $39 million deal. For him, it's weird. I do like him. I think he's a fantastic big time player. We saw that playoff game where I think he had 4 touchdowns, which was insane in a losing game, by the way. He's great, but that's what he is. He's a big play guy, which means that he disappears sometimes. Sometimes you don't notice him at all, and then randomly he'll come out and go crazy for you, or he'll get that 150-yard catch you needed. But I think that's a solid addition for Jacksonville. Gives Trevor Lawrence another option. Hopefully, that'll help Trevor Lawrence continue to develop. Obviously, he has not become the quarterback that we have expected, at least that I expected. Everyone's kind of looked at him as the best thing since Andrew Luck, and we haven't seen that yet. You know, so we'll see if he continues to develop, or what happens with him. I'm an LSU fan. I don't hate Trevor Lawrence, but I really enjoyed watching him lose the national title. But I do hope that he continues to develop and gets better, because you want those big time prospects to be good. You don't want them to fail. It's boring. You want good football, you want fun football. Let those prospects go crazy. We need more people to challenge Patrick Mahomes, not be Patrick Mahomes and a bunch of people who never, panned out the way they were supposed to in the draft. Speaking of a former Trevor Lawrence weapon, we have Calvin Ridley, who signed a 4-year, $92 million deal to play in Tennessee next to DeAndre Hopkins. He did lose a year of his career due to the suspension from gambling while he was in Atlanta, so last year was still a good year. He still had over 1,000 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. But, I feel like he could be better than that. That's coming off of a long time not playing football. So, he's going to be playing with D Hop. He's going to be playing with Will Levis. Not really sold on Will Levis. I know that first game he had was amazing, but we'll see. Not really sold on it though. So, we'll kind of go from there. Another one is Darnell Mooney, who I actually forgot to mention when talking about Kirk Cousins. Signed a 3-year, $39 million deal in Atlanta. He's the kind of guy you look at his stats and you're like, well, he's not that great, but it's Chicago and you really can't judge him based off of how play. I mean, it was pretty much DJ Moore and everybody else. So he ended up with a 400 yards, in about 15 games. Not great. Obviously not great at all. But I think if you actually watch him play, he's big time. He can be big time. He can make big time catches. He's got a humongous upgraded quarterback going to Kirk Cousins now. And obviously he'll be partnered up with London and Randall Moore, which makes a huge difference. He's going to be surrounded by talent on that offense. If they got a good line, so Kirk Cousins should stay pretty protected and be able to get the ball downfield. And I like that signing a lot for Atlanta. This one is one that I don't like so much, only because sometimes you're just ready for the Chiefs to start losing. And the Marquise Brown signed a 1-year deal for the Chiefs. Great for him. Fantastic for him. I'm sure he's going to have a fantastic year if he can stay healthy. Him and Colin Murray had some good chemistry, but it's Patrick Mahomes. He can get down the field. I think that could be a match made in heaven. Stay healthy, and he's going to have a fantastic year. I feel like he's been a better number 2. I don't know if he's necessarily a number 1, but I think of Kelsey as really the number 1 receiver over there for the Chiefs. So I think it's a good fit. I think it'll be great. Some other bigger news is Michael Thomas was released by the Saints after he failed his physical. Former Offensive Player of the Year. I mean, he has a record for most catches ever in a season in NFL history. So hopefully he can, rehab and maybe pull the Odell Beckham Jr. route and kind of work his way back and sign a 1-year deal and go on a contending team and, contribute. He was pretty good before he got hurt this year. So and then speaking of Odell Beckham Jr., he is visiting the Miami Dolphins right now. No signing right now, no deal in place, but I mean that's a solid receiving core to go to. But really haven't seen. We see moments of vintage Odell Beckham Jr., but at this point, I think he's just a great guy who's been on a championship team who can kind of bring that aspect, and he can make a big catch when you need it. We'll see where he ends up. So now we're gonna get into running backs, bro. Last year, running backs, nobody wanted to pay anybody. All, Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and all those players weren't getting shit. I mean, they weren't paying them guys nothing. They ended up having to settle for 1-year deals. And you know what? Good for them, because this was the free agency to get paid in. I don't know if it's the draft class quality of running backs or what, but these boys got paid. Starting off with Saquon Barkley, who signed with the Philadelphia Eagles on a 3-year, $37.75 million deal. Not an insane contract, but I mean, former Offensive Rookie of the Year. He has 3,000-yard seasons, including 2 that went for over 1,300 yards. He was literally the Giants' offense. No matter who's at quarterback, he was the offense. And he gets a insane upgrade at offensive line going to Philly from the Giants. look out for that first game he has against New York. I think he's going to run for 200 or at least get 200 all purpose because I think he needs to show them boys what they should have kept him because he was their offense. And if you look at the offense over there in New York now, it's just pitiful. I don't know what they're doing over there. They haven't shown any signs of getting any better so far in the free agency. I don't know. We'll see. Next up, and as you guys know, if you listen to episode one, I am a Green Bay Packers fan. We have signed Josh Jacobs on a 4-year, $48 million deal. That's a big contract. He has spent his entire career with the Raiders. He has been one of the best running backs over the last few years. Last year wasn't great, but they had really no passing game. So I'm trying not to really look at last year as really any indication of what you're getting. My concern with him is he does have a lot of miles over those last few years. They have been using him as their engine. So we'll see kind of, if he can stay healthy over here in Green Bay. He was the rushing king just a few years ago in 2022. He was first team All Pro that year. I mean, he's pretty much the best running back in the world that year. So, you know, Green Bay has a pretty effective passing game. Should open the field for him a little bit. Big shoes to fill with Aaron Jones leaving. Not necessarily with talent, but Jones was a fan favorite. We loved Jones. I still love Jones. He did sign in Minnesota. I'm not happy about that, but they are getting a weapon. And for some reason, LaFleur did not use Jones as an every down back like he could be. So hopefully, as well, that they use Josh Jacobs like he's supposed to be, not as an occasional weapon. Use him. LaFleur loves the run game, but he tends to lean more towards Dylan for some reason. And Dylan's big, but like he doesn't play that big. His yards per carry is not great. He really doesn't really push down on those 1 yard to gain plays. So, he did come back as well, but I hope they use Josh Jacobs as an every down back more often than they did with Jones. Next one is the biggest one, I would say. Derrick Henry has signed with the Baltimore Ravens on a 2-year, $16 million deal. Pretty cheap contract, about $8 million a year. He's the king, dude. I mean, he's the greatest running back we've seen in the last, 10 years. Not maybe you consider, McCaffrey in that category as well, obviously, but as a pure runner, is Derrick Henry. I mean, and something about him, when you look at Derrick Henry, doesn't he look like a Baltimore Raven? He looks like he's going to punch you in the face. He looks, scary. He looks like what you would expect from the Baltimore Ravens. you know, he's had over 10 touchdowns in 6 consecutive seasons, including a few years ago in 2021. He had over 10 in 8 games. So if you'd played that whole season, he was on pace for probably a 20 plus touchdown season, which is insane. For a guy who just purely runs, is not really getting those receiving touchdowns. That's insane. His down year this past year still almost had 1,200 yards and 12 touchdowns. There's one thing is if his yards aren't there, he can get past that 1 yard line to get into the end zone. That's huge for the Ravens. They don't have to rely too much on Lamar Jackson and make some magic happen at the line. They have a guy that you can just push him in. He gonna get in. How much is left in the tank? I don't know. He's been the most utilized running back in many years now, but he still looks as fast as ever. Still looks as mean as ever. They got a pretty solid line over there in Baltimore, so I'm not too worried about that necessarily, but it's still a question. But he should be really dynamic with Lamar Jackson. I mean, Lamar Jackson's ability to be mobile, the play action should be really good. I really got to count for Derrick Henry. You're not worried about Gus Edwards now. You're worried about Derrick Henry coming downfield. So I think that's going to be a match made in heaven. As of right now, he has he has tied the record for most 200-yard games in a career. There's no doubt. I think he hits that at least once this year. So look for that record to be broken. As for accolades, he's got 2 rushing yard leaders in the league, and he is a offensive player of the year. That is going to be big time. If he stays healthy and he's still got at least some in the tank, Baltimore, that might be the piece. Lamar's got to be good in the clutch games, but that might be the piece. Good for Baltimore. Tony Pollard signed with Tennessee Titans, which is Derrick Henry's replacement. Not, that's a downgrade, but 3-year, $24 million deal. He did just come off of a 1,000-yard season in Dallas. He's very inconsistent. You can't really lean on him to be that, every down back that's going to help you win games on a regular basis, but he can occasionally make that big time move for you. So we'll see how that does in Tennessee. I'm not really expecting much of him, but they had to get somebody back there. Their game is really focused on the run. So hopefully this will help. He's still young. He's only 26 years old. He gives them some stability. So, we'll see. Austin Eckler signed with the Washington Commanders on a 2-year, $11.43 million deal. This dude was the fantasy machine. I mean, he was the fantasy god for a couple of years there. Really there while McCaffrey was dealing with all those injuries. But man, he only had 3.5 yards per carry and the lowest rushing yards and receiving yards he's had since 2020 when he only played 10 games. He's never had under 4.2 yards per carry before this. So I mean, I don't know. He looked very slow. There was a few plays where he was running down the sideline trying to make a big play, and I mean, most running backs would have scored touchdowns. He looked like he was running with cement attached to his shoes. Man, it wasn't great. Does he give the Commanders at least an option out of the backfield? For sure, he can still make catches and get you some yards, but I think they have their primary back over there, so I think he's more going to be utilized, as a pass catcher more than a runner at this stage in his career. Good for him to get in contract though, especially after such a bad year. We'll kind of see how the Chargers kind of attack their running back position, if they're going to kind of roll with who they got, or if they're going to make a splash in the draft to add somebody dynamic back there. Or we got Harbaugh over there. There's a certain running back in the draft that really might fit the mold. So we'll see. DeAndre Swift signed with the Chicago Bears on a 3-year, $24 million deal. He had his first career 1,000-yard season last year, which had a lot to do with his health. He's always been a very good player, couldn't stay healthy in Detroit. He only had 6 touchdowns, but don't hold that against him. This was the year of the tush push. I mean, basically no running back on that team got to really touch the goal line. So if you were getting touchdowns, it was from, 5, 10 yards back of the goal line or a big play. So I think that it'll be a downgraded offensive line, obviously, if the Bears can't make some good moves in the draft, but still a good player. He's joining some weapons that gives another weapon for Caleb Williams, a guy who can make a big play when you need it. So I like that for Chicago. That's a solid signing. They got a good little core right there in the running back room. Some honorable mentions. We got Devin Singletary, who signed with the New York Giants on a 3-year, $16.5 million deal. Downgrade from Saquon, but still a very good running back. But that offense is atrocious. You can't expect Devin Singletary to carry that team. They have to make some major moves in the trade department or, in the draft. They got to make some moves. Gus Edwards did sign with the Los Angeles Chargers on a 2-year, $6.5 million deal. Like I said, I do think they still need to make a move there. I like Gus. I just don't think he's a number one. So hopefully they do address that probably in the draft. Zach Moss signed with the Bengals after the Bengals traded Mixon to the Texans. They wanted to keep him, Mixon, but just money, man. They're trying to make room to try to find, try to sign T. Higgins. They're trying not to lose everybody. They had to pick, and that's what they had to do. So Zach Moss had a great year in Indianapolis, while injuries were allowing him to be able to be the number one player over there. So I think that's a solid get for the Bengals. I think he can be a reliable running back to kind of play off of Joe Burrow, and we'll see how that goes. But I like that signing for the Bengals a lot. And the Texans getting Mixon is fantastic. I mean, on that Texans offense that's already looking, dynamite after this past year, that's going to be he's a great weapon to add to that. So look out for the Texans offense this year to probably be top 5, top 5, top 10. They have the chance. As long as we don't see any sophomore slumps, it's going to be the real deal. The only offensive lineman I mentioned on here was Tyron Smith, signed with the New York Jets. So he's going to be the new protector of Aaron Rodgers. That's a big deal to me. I love Aaron Rodgers. I'm not really very privy on offensive linemen. I'll be honest. Some of the superstar ones I'm pretty comfortable with knowing about, but your regular guards and really good guards, I really don't know that well. So I didn't put them on here. I feel like I wouldn't be saying anything worthwhile if I tried to talk about them. So that's all the mentions that I have. But we're gonna go read over some defensive moves as well and kind of give, little takes that I have on that. So let's get that pulled up. And then I didn't mention tight ends either, just because the biggest tight end signings were re-signings. There really wasn't any big time moves there. So at the interior defensive line, Chris Jones stayed in Kansas City.
Christian Wilkins signed with the Las Vegas Raiders on a 4-year, $120 million deal. That's great. That's a good signing for them for the Las Vegas Raiders. He's coming from Miami, so that should be a big time move for them to improve their defense. DJ Reader, who was in Cincinnati, dealt with some injuries at the end of the year there, signed with the Detroit Lions on a 2-year deal. Good for them. Fletcher Cox did retire. Fantastic career for him. On the edge, we got Josh Allen and Brian Burns are franchise tagged right now. Brian Burns was traded from the Carolina Panthers to the New York Giants. So the Giants at least made a move to try to make their defense better. Daniel Hunter, fantastic player, signed with the Houston Texans. They're going to continue to build their defense to kind of play on par with that offense. And again, watch out for those Texans. Chase Young signed with the New Orleans Saints. A lot of potential there. We'll kind of see how he does next to Cam Jordan. Jadeveon Clowney still unsigned. A few other names. Like I said, I'm not going to go over all the names just because I'm going to have a lot of opinions on those. Biggest linebacker that was signed, Patrick Queen, left the Baltimore Ravens to sign with rival Pittsburgh Steelers on a 3-year, $41 million deal. Not the greatest coverback. We have seen that he did improve once he was next to a all-time type of middle linebacker. We'll kind of see how he does over there in Pittsburgh, but still a great player. LSU boy. I have a lot of love for him. So we'll see how he does. But I do like that signing for Pittsburgh. I just hope that, he was able to learn a lot, playing with Roquan and is able to actually play some coverage for the Pittsburgh Steelers in that area. But fantastic player. Really like that. Levante David stayed with the Buccaneers. Bobby Wagner went to the Commanders. Really weird to think about Bobby Wagner as a Commander. Jordan Brooks went over there to Miami Dolphins. Devin White went to the Philadelphia Eagles. Devin White's kind of fallen off since that Super Bowl, but he's got the potential to kind of bounce back, especially on a great team like Philadelphia. I really like that one a lot. At cornerback, Jalen Johnson stayed with the Chicago Bears. He was a pretty big staple at corner for Chicago this past year. Right now, L'Jarius Sneed has been franchise tagged by Kansas City. I think they'll make a deal come through with that, though. Kendall Fuller, who was the number one defensive back in free agency, signed with Miami on a 2-year deal. Miami's kind of rebuilding that cornerback room right now, so that's a good move for them for sure. That's all we're gonna do for cornerback, and then at safety, we just pretty much have some franchise tags with Anton Winfield Jr. with the Buccaneers, and Kyle Duggar stayed with Patriots with a franchise tag, so we'll see if that sticks. Geno Stone left Baltimore to go play in Cincinnati. Xavier McKinney, Green Bay Packer, fantastic year over there in New York last year. Really replaces some moves that the Packers have had to make. We've lost safeties pretty much consecutively over the last few years. So he's going to be that guy. He's going to be the guy at safety. He's really going to complement, our cornerback room, which is only going to get better. Him and Jair should play some fantastic football in the same field. They're really loving that. Another one I really liked was CJ Gardner Johnson going back to Philadelphia. He was solid for Detroit, but I really, really liked him as a Philadelphia Eagle. He fits that mold, man. He just feels like a Philadelphia Eagle. Darnell Savage did leave the Packers to go play with the Jaguars. Solid player, butterfinger hands. He's dropping interceptions left and right. Not the greatest, but he's got some good moves. Micah Hyde is still a free agent. Eddie Jackson is still a free agent. So we still got some safety moves that can be made. So that's my free agency wrap up. Hopefully you enjoyed kind of hearing my analysis on some of these moves. I'm looking forward to the draft. Something you can look forward to is that me and Huddy are going to be doing a collaborative project this weekend where we're going to kind of go over a mock draft, look at it, analyze it, and we're going to kind of give our takes on it. So we're going to go down the list. We're going to say if we would, if we agree with it, if we don't agree with it, why we don't agree with it. We're going to give ourselves some vetoes to like move that player out of that position. We're probably going to do like top 15 picks at first. We might follow up with the last 15 for the first round. That's the plan as of right now. But it should be a very fun project. Me and him are going to have a lot of fun debating and talking shit to each other about who's wrong and who's, doesn't know what they're talking about. And we try to keep it PG, but me and him behind the camera or off the camera or off the microphone, it's not podcast friendly. So, You don't want to hear that. I mean, you might. It's probably pretty funny, but maybe we'll save that for people that may not be so sensitive. Which people that listen to my podcast shouldn't be sensitive, but I try to keep it a welcoming place for everybody. So that is my free agency run up. I really appreciate everybody coming out here to listen. I don't care if there's one of you. I don't care if there's 10 of you. If there's 100 of you, I appreciate you. I love you for being here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully, I didn't sound so robotic. Even though I was reading stats the whole time, I tried to be more like I was having a conversation. As usual, my email is Dante's Dialogues at gmail.com. Email me with questions, ideas you have for me, questions you want me to ask on the podcast, suggestions, complaints. Tell me how I'm stupid and I don't know anything about Xavier McKinney or, whatever you want to message me about. Email me, comment on my social media posts. You can now find me on Facebook at Dante's Dialogues. You can find me on X, aka Twitter, also under Dante's Dialogues. It's just going to be at Dante's Dialogues. Nothing's crazy. I'm going to try to be a little active on there and be able to communicate with people when they decide to respond. So that's the episode. My next episode will probably include me just rambling. I don't want to have a script. I kind of just want to talk about what's on my mind at the moment, whether it's about anime, hockey, sports, maybe ramble about how my teams have been doing awful in some of the sports, or, you know, we're just going to play it as like a general conversation. So that'll be fun. So look forward to that. Keep an eye on Mind of Huddy. Once again, we were going to be collaborating very regularly. So make sure you check him out. Thank you all for listening. I really appreciate it. We'll see you next time. All right. Have a good one.